Welcome to the Joy Work Show, the podcast that goes beyond the surface of business, right to the heart, to explore the real joy and the stories behind success. Not just the moments of celebration, but the challenges that pave the way for them. Hiya, I'm Diane, and here we know that joy isn't just about the good times. Often, the greatest joy comes right after the greatest challenge. Today's conversation is one of those stories that will stop you in your tracks. I'm joined by Cheryl Sharp, an incredible woman whose journey from surviving an abusive marriage to becoming a domestic abuse advocate and CEO is nothing short of inspiring. In this episode, Cheryl opens up about what it really takes to rebuild after trauma, from leaving her own marriage and starting her own business to finding healing through counselling, community, and purpose. We talk about the role education plays in preventing domestic abuse, how employers can create safer spaces for survivors, and what true resilience looks like when the world expects you to crumble. This is a story of courage, transformation, and proof that life after trauma is not only possible, it can be powerful and full of magic. So settle in, this one's going to move you. Hi Cheryl, and welcome to the Joy Work Show. I am so delighted to welcome you here today, and it's one of those episodes that I love where I get to find out all about you at the exact time as the audience does. So tell us, who are you, what do you do, and how did you get here?
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome.
So I am Cheryl Sharp. Got a bit of a made up title really. So I call myself a domestic abuse advocate and speaker, and I'm the CEO of my first business. So a little bit of a backstory, I guess, will help set the scene. In 2011, I left an abusive marriage and didn't really know what I was doing, how I was going to do it, how I was going to survive, really. It was just one of them things. I saw an opportunity, took it, left, and then tried figuring out how my life was going to be going forward. I went back to work for a little bit, went and had a role with a friend in his business. I was part trained as an accountant. So he gave me an opportunity where I could pretty much set my own hours, which was amazing because it meant because I was on my own with my two boys, and they were, what were they? 3, 2, 3, and the old one was back 4 or 5 at the time. So it was a case of, obviously I needed to be around for them. They was at school and preschool, but I also needed to work. Yeah, it was a really great opportunity. But then I moved towns and could no longer get to my employed role between school hours. So I was like, right, maybe now's the time to kind of put the big girl pants on. And I set up my own business in accounts, looking after other small business owners, particularly mums, because we could relate, school runs and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, just was really trying to help them run their business, but also be present for their children and have that flexibility. Numbers is not many people's favourite thing in the world. Only sad people like numbers. So yeah, I was able to support them so they could focus on being in their business and present, but also being mum at home as well. So yeah, that was kind of how the business started. And I guess for the first few years, I was pretty much in survival mode, just trying to earn some money, look after the boys, and generally build a bit of a life for myself. And it wasn't until an incident in 2020, smack bang in the middle of COVID, as these things always do. And we had to get the police involved and everything. And I finally recognised how much I needed some support and help. And that's when I first started having counselling and working with a business coach on my mindset and things. And the difference from then to now is just incredible. I think I was literally just, as I said before, in survival mode. So it was just, I was building a business, but I wasn't really believing in myself or anything like that. So it wasn't until I got the help that I actually started believing in myself, grew some confidence and stuff. And then one day I shared with my coach, who I still see regularly, thoroughly couldn't be without her now. She's stuck with me, poor thing. I just said to her, I said, I'd really love to help people like me. people who have left abusive situations and just don't know what to do next, want to rebuild their lives and things. I had this really big, well, I still have this really big dream, but it means I need a lottery bin to be able to do it. So I shared that with her and she's like, well, what can you do? What baby steps can we do to get you started? And from there, I started sharing my story with abuse, sharing more around my personal journey in business and things to really show what is possible, but also show that there is life after abuse and things like that. And then it kind of went a little bit further and I was like, I'd really love to do this more, want to help more women like me. Last year or earlier this year, sorry, I wrote a policy for employers, for businesses on how they can support their teams and how they can recognise the signs, how to approach somebody they believe is potentially experiencing abuse, how to have that conversation. Because I think employers they're not trained for that kind of thing. They're not trauma informed, the majority of them. Some of them will be, obviously. So yeah, it's a scary thing. How do you have that conversation with somebody? So yeah, I wrote the policy and wrote some training and now working with employers as well to create those safe environments for survivors to actually thrive. And it's really, really, I love it.
I mean, it's such, obviously, I knew before you came on today that the subjects we would be covering. And it's always, as somebody who hasn't suffered that, known people that have, but not personally, it's always difficult to kind of, like you said, you're now telling employers because people don't know what to say and people don't know what to do with the signs. And I know when I had teams of people in my private sector career, I know there was people who showed the signs. There was some people that I did then go on to help who then left situations, but there was also people that you can see the signs, but because you're not trained in dealing with it and you say things to yourself like, why don't they just leave?
Yeah.
Like, logically, as somebody who's in a healthy relationship, I think, well, if he ever put me in that position, I would just leave. But it's not that simple and it's not helpful to say those things. And you don't understand what the implications are.
Yeah.
And, I saw there was something the other day where somebody was talking about it. I can't remember what show it was on. It was on TV and they were saying about it's not as simply saying, I'll help you leave because you don't understand the repercussions. You don't understand the kind of danger and the safety measures that need to get put in place. So without having to go into too much detail, how did you know that was the time to leave and did you have support around you or was it literally just you were at the point of, for me to survive and get these boys away from this situation, I just need to go now?
Yeah. There was two turning points really. So one kind of in my head, I knew this has got to stop. I've got this. But at that point, I was like, right, I need to leave. I just don't know how to leave. And that was a very violent episode that happened. And I actually reached out. I remember I reached out to two people at the time, a friend down the road and my brother. And neither answered the phone. I was like, the first time I've actually reached out and neither of you answered the phone. But I think in hindsight, it was probably good because although at that moment I realised I need to get out, I still wasn't ready to get out, if that makes sense. Because there was still so much I needed to figure out in my own head and figure out what leaving would look like. So I think that's half of the battle is, yes, on some level, a lot of people know they need to leave, but then it's the how and what happens next. And can be scarier sometimes than being in the situation. So that goes back to your point of why don't they just leave? That is one of the reasons. So yeah, then it becomes all the practical sides of where do we go? How am I going to afford anything? Because I wasn't working at the time. What do I do? Basically. So yeah, that first incident kind of got me thinking enough's enough. We need to go. And then he actually left thinking I'd beg him to stay. But when he'd gone, I was like, right, this is my opportunity. Now I need to, if I don't grasp this opportunity, who knows if or when it will ever happen again. So that was my moment. I was like, right now, let's do something. Let's get the ball rolling. And I spoke to a solicitor at the point, and she helped me to get things going. It wasn't a straightforward thing after that. It took quite a long time to actually be out of the situation, but it started that ball rolling, which was the biggest step really, because if I hadn't have got that ball rolling, I don't think I would have got out at that point at all.
Hmm. And it's outstanding to me, and it's a subject that comes up a lot on this podcast, but I can only think of a few times where it's been out of trauma and tragedy. But resilience is underrated for people who want to be an entrepreneur, want to be a business owner, want to change their lives, even if it's employed work or, doing something else, but wanting to change your life. And that, how do you think you found that resiliency in something that, because what was really interesting, what you said there was, even though you were in a really dangerous situation and you knew and you recognized the dangerous situation you were in and to get out, but that was your known, that was your everyday life. Whereas the leaving is the complete opposite and the complete unknown,
Yeah.
and how much you would need to fight to keep that new life. Because I take it from obviously I've not experienced it, but my understanding is it doesn't stop when you leave. So how did you find that resiliency and belief?
Yeah. I think just quickly, just to touch on it, it is that fear of the unknown. And sometimes the fear of the unknown is more than fear of what you know, is a big one. But also, they condition you so much. If you leave, this will happen. If you leave, that will happen. So, again, that's not only the fear of the unknown of how, but it's also the fear of what else will happen. And as you say, it doesn't stop when you leave, unfortunately, especially when you have children. It doesn't. But I think I'm naturally quite a stubborn person, which helps with that resilience because I know that if I set my mind to something, I will do it and I won't stop until I've done it. I guess being stubborn in turn has helped me be resilient. Just digging my heels in and thinking this needs to happen. If I don't follow through, I know what will happen. And I guess I kind of switch my mindset a little bit in, well, I know what will happen if I don't. So let's try the other option and go from there. So yeah, I think being stubborn really, really helps actually.
Stubborn helps a lot of things. Stubborn does help a lot of things. But that's the exact thing as well. It's a story we hear again and again and again. And I think there's still some taboos to be broken down, that people presume that the person being abused would be vulnerable or weak or not a strong person or not even an independent person. The abusers, kind of like bullies, find the weakest to kind of, but that isn't the case. There is strong and men. There are strong women and men up and down the country that we would, and around the world, of course, that we would have no idea that are in abusive relationships because they're in high powered careers. They are on our TV sets every single day. They're the breadwinners. They seem like they're in positions of power and opportunity, but you do not know what is going on behind closed doors, and we can't presume that that is the case. Of course, there's those who prey on the weak and the vulnerable, but that isn't always the way it works with domestic abuse.
No, anybody can experience it. It's not it, the the abusers all have different angles and different things, but a lot of abusers are attracted to people that are stronger, that have built lives for themselves and things, because they can then use that against them, and it's leverage and it's things like that. So Melanie Brown, Mel B from Spice Girls, is a main example of this. It's just like you would not think in a million years that it would happen to her because she's Scary Spice. She's
Yeah,
this
exactly.
strong, amazing woman, but that was leverage because he had that over her. He could get in control of her money, he could get control of her career and all things like that to make her how he wanted her. And I don't know her full story, but I do know quite a lot of it. And that's kind of what he did. That's how he prayed and things like that. Yeah. Yes, they prey on vulnerable people, but they also prey on those who are stronger. It's just, yeah, it doesn't discriminate abuse. unfortunately.
Absolutely doesn't. It doesn't. Absolutely doesn't at all. And I think that's going back to the employer thing. I think that's when it's the difficult thing, because if you see somebody coping and who's a great mum and holding down a great job and position within your company, and then you just, there's always signs, but it's when do you do them and when do you see them? So when you're speaking to employers, what is the guidance that you give them? And I suppose it'd be similar guidance for anybody out there who's listening to this who might think, well, this sounds like my sister, my neighbour, my friend, the mum at school. What kind of signs are we looking for?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, it's really important to say is you're not expected to fix it for them.
No, yeah,
And I think that's where a lot of people come at the angle from is how can I fix it? You can't fix it. You're not trained to do so. You're not in a position to do so. You are there as a support mechanism and to refer to the relevant places, and the relevant organisations will then help do what they need to do to help leave and things like that. So I think that is the first thing that's really important to share. We're not there to fix. We're here to help, support, and guide you to the people who can. Signs to look out for. Obvious signs is bruising and injuries, but the more subtle signs are things like being withdrawn, not wanting to go out as much, really withdrawing and becoming isolated from people, becoming quite like at work, your performance could drop, you could be late, you could be absent a lot and things like that. So it's little things, and they could all point to various different things, not necessarily abuse. It could be a lot of things going on, but they're the main ones. You've also got at work, especially if someone's constantly being harassed on the phone, you could see them either being completely scared of the phone and I do that because my phone's right here.
right there.
So yeah, they could be scared of the phone, or they could be like the second there's a ping message, they're like having to respond, but it's just things that don't look quite add up as normal, that you'd think that's a little bit odd, but on their own in isolation may not mean anything. But if there's a person of things, then that can mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it's abuse. It could be something else is going on, but something's not going on. And I say to people, the best way to approach somebody and just ask, because 9 times out of 10, they're not going to come to you, is just say, notice you're not yourself. Do you want to talk? And
Yeah.
you need to say that 5, 10, 15, 20 million times before they actually open up and talk. But being patient and just letting them know that you're there is the most powerful thing you can do.
I think that's sorry, I think that's really important, because my I would be like a bull in a china shop, and I'd be like, look, I think this is going on. I think this is happening. I'll get you out of it. I'll help you. That kind of way of like that fixer mentality, when the person might not be ready. You might terrify them. They're then terrified of the situation escalating, and actually you could escalate a situation that actually the person who's being abused is in control of in their own way.
Yeah.
And I think what you said earlier about it has to be the right time, because they have to be ready. You can't force a situation, possibly make it worse,
Yeah.
just because you
Yeah, as I say, the more you try and force, in essence, the more you're pushing that person away. You're doing it with love and from a good place, but for them, it's just they retreat further because they can't cope with it, because they're not able to cope with it. I think that's the thing, is saying, I know something's going on and I'm here when you're ready. I'm here to help. I'm here to support you. I love you no matter what, kind of thing. Obviously, a friend or family would say that to your employee. I love you no matter what. But you know what I mean? It is that kind of, um, it's that kind of thing, because what they'll also be experiencing is a lot of fear, obviously, but a lot of shame and embarrassment, possibly guilt, because they're guilty that they're going to talk badly about their partner. So
Mhm.
it's a lot of emotions going on in there. And if you are pushing, they're more likely to withdraw and potentially isolate themselves from you. It's like that thing, like nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news, because quite often it comes back on them, doesn't it? So it's like,
Yes.
it's that same thing. So yes, gentle, a lot of patience. And I have spoken to a lot of people that support and friends and family, and they've said how frustrating they feel, because they're like, I just need them to, and I'm like, but they're not ready yet. And they will
But you
when they're
have to
ready.
understand, it's a can of worms they're opening. It's not just simple of if somebody's feeling unwell and you've been pestering them to go to the doctors because you think something might be seriously wrong, but they make the doctor's appointment and then you go to it together and you can support them through that. It's not as straightforward as that because they are going to totally upend their lives by saying it out loud. Because the minute they say it out loud, they can't take it back. There's now somebody else that knows, that's in on what they feel is probably a dirty little secret
Yeah.
and something that they, like you said, feel shame and guilt about. And I think we often forget that whether it's a man or a woman, it's a person that they will probably still be in love with.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, it's the parent of their child. It's the person they thought they were building a life with. And as much as in the back of their heads, they might be like, I need to get out. I do not want to be with this person. It must be a really confusing time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also a lot of people don't realise that they're in that situation because a lot of people, especially if it's not a violent situation, it's the other types of abuse, they may not realise that's unhealthy and it's not right. Yeah, if you're saying something to them, they may take offence to it and be like, well, it's normal. And it might take them a little while to realise. I mean, I had a couple of violent episodes, but most of mine was more emotional, coercive, controlling, that kind of types of abuse. And I always was thought that, well, other people have got it worse than me because other people have been injured, they've been broken bones, things like that. So it's not that bad, is what I kept telling myself. And I didn't really believe that I was experiencing abuse until we got the police involved and they turned around and said it was one of the worst cases he'd seen locally. And I was like, oh, and that validated what I was going through, helped me to again move on that little bit further as well. But if I'd reported it back then and heard those words back then, I probably would have left a lot quicker. But
Yeah.
it's ifs and buts and great with hindsight,
Yeah.
isn't it? But it just helps
Yeah.
me to help other people and see that.
Yeah, well, it's that thing, isn't it? Because you know there was so many times that you, in your head, probably felt that it was a time that you should have left, but you understand why you didn't and
Yeah.
how it's not straightforward rather than somebody like me saying, well, you know, I don't understand why you don't leave. I don't understand. And I think what's really interesting, what you just said, is like, it's almost like, well, it's easier if there's bruises and you're being hurt because it doesn't get tied up into that if it's coercive, if they're controlling your finances, if they're controlling your behavior, if they're controlling everything you do, because they always do it from a place of love. And like, I do this because I love you so much. And you're almost trained into that feeling of that's because they love me and how lucky am I that I am loved so much that my whole world's taken care of by this person.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that's another way of keeping them in,
Hmm.
keeping them so that they don't leave. It is really tough. And I think until you understand or we get that out there in the public, that more people will be able to understand and then realise why they don't just leave.
Yeah,
Why?
exactly. So how did it look when you were setting your business up? How did it look when you got to that point?
I think it was more a case of I need to do this.
Yeah.
I was physically out of the situation, but I was experiencing post separation abuse. Although I was stubborn and I knew I had to do something, and that was kind of what worked. I still didn't believe in myself and I still didn't have that confidence. And I just remember, like, you have to go out and sell yourself as a business owner. You have to network, you have to share on social media and do all of these things to say, come and work with me. I'm great at what I do. And when you don't believe it, it's really tough. So, yeah, I think I felt a lot of imposter syndrome massively. I still do today, but in a different way. A lot of jealousy as well, because I could see other accountants building their businesses quicker than I was. And I'm like, why can't I do that? Which just kind of knocked my confidence even more. So those first 6 years were pretty tough from that respect. So I didn't believe in myself and I wasn't doing what I knew I could do on one level because I could do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although I was doing bits and my business was growing and I was earning an income, I was looking after my boys and things like that, I didn't believe I was doing it, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Uh-huh. Well, the thing is, for you, you're not, as a business owner who came out like myself, came out of a career and then set up my business and went into it. And I went into it because I had two under two at the point I launched my business, and I just couldn't see any other way of working apart from me doing it myself. And I'd always kind of had dreams of what I might do when I was in my career, but nothing had quite given me the push the way motherhood gave me the push. So that's why I did it. But I can't imagine, and I know the fears and doubts that I've had the past 2 years being a new mum, changing my identity quite a bit, losing the identity of who I was, because my career was pretty much my whole personality at one point, and changing all that. I can't imagine adding an extra layer of the trauma that you had been through onto that. I can't, the belief and the confidence and the courage that I had to build up. I can't imagine having to do that on top of everything else. And like we said, the abuse doesn't end.
No.
So you were still doing that. What was it that literally kept you going? Was it just that fighter spirit, that independence, your boys? Was it?
Yeah, I think it was just the fact that I knew at some point it would be better. And at some point I wouldn't have to deal with what I was dealing with. And as I said before, I'm stubborn. And I think I also knew as well that I couldn't get a normal job because I was at that point unemployable because I had the boys, but I didn't have reliable childcare. I couldn't afford childcare. And their dad wasn't reliable, so which was another form of control. And I also got diagnosed with a medical condition as well very early on in my business journey. An employer wouldn't have put up with it at the time because we're talking pre-COVID when part-time wasn't really a thing. Flexible working definitely wasn't a thing. And working from home wasn't really a thing either. So yeah, I knew at that point I was unemployable. So that was my only way of earning an income and supporting the boys and paying the bills basically. So it kind of had to. And then I met my husband now, my now lovely husband, and he could see what I couldn't in me.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave me a lot of self-belief and started to build me back up. And he recognised what the business could be. And I think it was his encouragement and support which also then helped me to push forward. And then that incident during COVID where I actually reached out and started working with my coach, between her and James, my husband, that was the bit that I needed to help me actually believe in myself, get some confidence in what I'm doing, and push further forward. And the difference is amazing because beforehand I had 2 people working for me and now I've got a team of 6. And we've grown so
Amazing.
much in that time, that 4 years. Well, actually, we've grown literally in 2 years. I grew more than I'd grown in the 6 years previously. So it really does show what a different mindset has and how.
Mm-hmm. I'm a strategist, and I work with lots of businesses on their business strategy, but I particularly for entrepreneurs, it is 80% mindset, 20% strategy, because you can put all the strategy in place and it can be the best strategy you've ever seen. But if you don't have the mindset to execute it, follow it through, have the grit, have the resilience when it doesn't quite go to plan, then you may as well forget about it, and it's tough, and it's doing the work when nobody sees it, when nobody's clapping, when you get up this morning and you don't have the belief that you can do it, but you just kind of do it anyway, and it might not be perfect, but
Yeah,
that's okay. It's just that keeping going, and it's those that keep going are the ones that are going to succeed and, have greater growth in 2 years than they had in the previous 6, which is a brilliant story. And the one thing that you said that really kind of stands out for me, and even though you've talked about not having the confidence and not necessarily having the full belief in the difference it's made when you worked on it, but you still had belief when you left that it could get better. And I think for some people and anybody listening to this who may be in a position that they don't want to be in, just to even have that little glimmer that it could be better, or seeing your story and somebody who's been through maybe somebody's suffering the way you did, that it can get better. You'll still be dealing with it, it will still be there, but
Yeah,
it can get better.
it does. And I think that's one of the biggest driving forces behind sharing my stories, because I'm nothing special. And if I can do it, then so can others. And I think being a bit of a romanticist, is that the right word, at heart, I love my chick flick films. I love the romantic stories and novels and stuff. And probably believe in it a little bit too much, but that is what, that is my little glimmer. And that was like, well, if it happens in the movies, if it happens in the books, that's got to come from somewhere, right? So there's got to be something. And I could see I had new friends around me, and I could see how they were with their partners. And I was like, well, that's a healthy relationship. That's kind of what I want in the future. It is possible. And it's just seeing all those things and being open to seeing it as well. Because I think for so long you're so closed off and you just think, right, well, this is my life. I've got to deal with it and just get on with it. But you miss all those little glimmers. So yeah, being open to it and just thinking it is possible. Something can change, can come of it. And I think the other part of me as well is I'm a real big believer that things happen for a reason. And I've always been able to piece in my life why things have happened the way they have.
Mhm,
But that was the bit that I could never figure out. I was like, why has that happened? Why? And then the last few years, I'm like, well, that's what happened. So that I can
mhm.
be my story today and showing other people what is possible and that there is life afterwards and you can, yeah, you can go on and have a pretty good life.
Yeah. Yeah, that is lovely. Well, it's a perfect opportunity for us to go into the joy questions. Thank you so much for sharing the story. I know that it can't be easy when it's something so traumatic and personal. So thank you so much for that. But as you know, I ask all guests to prepare 3 joy questions before they come on. So the first one is your joy spotlight, a favourite thing that has shaped your life, business or work.
So I think it is discovering my purpose, discovering why I went through what I went through and being able to turn that into something positive and help other people. That's yeah, that's it.
It must be a really difficult thing to not admit's not the right word, but acknowledge that for you to go through something so awful and so traumatic and change your life and indeed change your children's lives, um, it mustn't be easy to then realise, but this is my purpose and I can help people with this. And like you said, it's that this was meant to happen so that I could do this, because without being in that relationship, you wouldn't have your children. Without being in that relationship, you wouldn't now be sharing your story and helping so many people. Did you find it difficult to come to terms with that?
Yeah, I think I did, but it was also a bit of a light bulb.
Yeah.
And yeah, it kind of just it felt like the missing piece of the puzzle really, because I had so many other things figured out and I'd worked out, yeah, all the other parts of the puzzle. And it was just that little bit. And I was just like, "Oh." So yeah, discovering that and acknowledging it was like, oh, missing piece of the puzzle. Now I can go forth and do what I'm here to do, basically.
Did it feel like you gaining back even more control? Like you've took control of your life, you've moved your children, you've built a business, you've got remarried to a lovely man, and but did it feel that final piece of like, I'm now reclaiming the story too?
Yeah, yeah. I've never really looked at it that way. And now you say that, yes, definitely. It was, I guess, the last part of reclaiming my own power.
I love that. I love that. That is really special. And I think it's important, because I think whenever we're going through anything, especially traumatic in our lives or different or something maybe we question in our lives, and I know that I do this, I look for people who have been through similar things. I look for the stories. I look for the people. I've got chronic illnesses, and every time I get a new slight diagnosis or a new kind of blood test that tells me something, I'm like searching for the people who had what I've got, but now they've had this results, and how did they get over it? Because I'm not looking for the sad stories. I'm looking for the stories that people who look like me and who want to continue life. And like we spoke about, like that belief that, yes, this has happened or is happening, or I've been through this thing, or I'm dealing with this thing, but I can still be ambitious. I can still be successful. I can still build a life I want to build. Things can get better. Things can change. And I think that when people like you are sharing their story and now making it their purpose, there'll be so many people, even listening to this, who'll be like, I need to leave, or it can get better, or I can take control of this. And it's not going to be easy and it's going to take time, but I can do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the thing. We don't realize how resilient we are when we're in that situation because we're just trying to get through the day type thing. But
Right.
there is so much strength and resilience going through that you just need to harness it in a different way to move forward. And I think that when we're in those situations, we have no self esteem, no self worth, and everything else like that. We think we have no good qualities. And I work with some ladies now in Refuge, and one of the first things I do is recognize those qualities in them. I'm like, you've got through this. How strong were you to get through that? How strong to leave? How and yeah, it's really amazing turning it around and seeing them realize as well that like, oh yeah, actually I am quite strong, or I've got quite a lot of resilience, and yeah, it's just incredible. It really is.
It is. And I don't think people who are in those situations realize how much they are coping with the situations and how they kind of manufacture their lives to deal with the reality that they are in. And they don't realize that that takes strength and resiliency and so many coping mechanisms to get through the day. And like you say, if you can channel that in another direction, that power that you have that you're using to control the abuser, to help your children, whatever situation that they are in, they don't understand what they're doing on a daily basis to survive, to look after those they love and all the bits in between. I think it's quite extraordinary. And like you say, if you can, with charities like Refuge, help people realise that and see that they kind of hold the power to change the direction, I guess. Okay, the next one is Inspired by Joy, a book or a mentor that has changed your life.
So I've got the same coach, Shelley. She definitely has. She has a massive impact on my life. But coupled with my husband, I don't think just one or the other on their own would have got me to where I am today. But together, the power. I think hearing it from one person, you kind of like, yeah, whatever, you're my husband, you're meant to think that about me. Or hearing it from a coach who are paid to tell you things, even though I know she would never tell me something that's not true. But you kind of get what I mean. When you hear it from one person, you can kind of rationalize, well, they've got to say that. But hearing it from two people in two different ways, that's where it kind of sunk in between the two of them. Yeah, it's kind of pushed me forward and everything else. So yeah, two people there.
I think it's important because I've worked with coaches, I've had people helping me with my biz, I've had people helping with my mindset and everything in between. But I know if I never had the support in the house, that all the kind of work the coaches would have done might have been undone, because I need that, like, I need to go down, like, after this, I'll have a conversation with my partner. We talked about this, and this was the podcast episode, and this is what you think about it. And, and we talk about, we've always kind of worked together until I launched the business, but we're kind of starting working together now, and we run things past each other. And he does believe in me in the days that I don't believe in me, and he reminds me
Yeah.
of, like, yeah, and it's like, "No, come on, right." It's like, "No, get up, come on, you said you were gonna do this today." And I'm like, "Yeah, but then," and you're like, "Remember what you did last week?
Mhm.
Remember when you did that hard thing? You remember?" And I'm like, "All right, okay." He gives me the proof,
Yeah.
and kind of picks me up and gives that belief back, because even if you're the greatest believer in your future and everything you're doing in the world, you have days where it kicks you in the bahookie. And I think it's really important. But like you say, I think it's important to have that support who isn't part of your everyday life, who can point out the gaps, who can perhaps say when you're not being honest with yourself, and as much as they are building you up and building that belief. We all need called out.
Yeah.
We all need that kind of thing of like, I need people who work with me to say, no, Dan, I'm calling BS on that today because you're not, this is why. And I think that's really important because if Ash, my partner, was to do that, I'd be like, don't you do that to me.
Yeah. But yeah, James can't do that for me, but yeah, my coach does. She definitely does, and she can know straight away. I've been working with her for so long now; she knows me inside out, so she knows straight away. She's like, no, no, no.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, and I think from that, I think people need to learn that we don't have to do it alone. Like entrepreneurship, business owner, building a new life, you do not have to do it alone. There is so many different ways you can be supported, and but it's important to find the person that clicks.
Yeah,
And
definitely. I went to a few different coachy type of people until I found Shelley, and then yeah, we clicked, and I've not looked back.
and look at the difference it's made in your life from a life that you'd already transformed yourself quite a bit.
Yeah, she's been like the icing on the cake, and then now pushes me further than I ever thought possible, but in the right way. She's not like a pushy parent. She's like that supportive, "Come on, you can do this," type thing, and she's quite often, well, both her and my husband, to be fair. My husband's more the pushy parent, I guess, 'cause he's not quite as, careful with his delivery, should I say. He's quite brutal. So
Um,
it's like, "You can do it. Come on, get off your ass. I'm gonna do it." Whereas she's a bit more calls out the BS, and he's more encouraging and like, "Well, you can do it," and she will give me the
mhm,
evidence and
yeah,
the logical bit behind it that I need, which my husband wouldn't
uh-huh,
do, just tell me to go and do it, whereas she'd be like, "Go and do it because this is where you've shown before you can do it," type thing.
yeah,
So it's the two-prong approach.
yeah,
But then I do it back for my husband as well, so we do it to each other.
yeah. It must have been special for you when you realised that you now had that support from a partner.
Yeah, and I didn't believe it for a long, long time. I just couldn't accept it or believe it, and I'm just like, "No, no, this isn't." No. And I would just tell him quite often, "Stop being so stupid," or yeah, I'd really question it at the beginning. To be fair, even now, sometimes I question it, but it's a lot less, lot less. But yeah, it took me a long, long time to feel comfortable with him being nice and
Yeah,
encouraging and supportive. And even last night, we was having a chat, and I've been offered something, and I was like, "Oh, I can't because that's going to put him out." And I was like, "Oh, it's no," and I nearly turned it down. And he's like, "What are you doing that for?" He's like, "Do it." I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah, of course, yeah, I forgot."
yeah, I forgot that you support me in this. I forgot that you've got my back, even if it makes you slightly more uncomfortable or not as easy for you.
Yeah, exactly. So it is, yeah, I still have my moments like that, but they're fewer and further between. Yeah, that's the right way of saying it, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's that thing as well because I think even like I said, as a business owner and a mum, there's definitely times where me and Ash will have a conversation. I'll be like, "Oh, this is coming up, but I can't go because I need to pick the kids up, or I need to do this, or I need to do that." Because we made a decision that when we had the girls, that I would be the default parent, the one the school phones, the one who's flexible, the one, and we made it the decision together. We sat down and we properly made the kind of decision. But he's like, yeah, no, but now that that we did that when they were babies and we're talking about nurseries and things and getting me back to work. But he's like, yeah, but if it's a school pickup and this thing's happening and I can do it, you're still the default parent, Diane. Don't worry. But
Yeah,
I can do that one day if
yeah,
it works in the calendar. Obviously, depending on his work, if he can't because that's the decision that we made. But it's knowing that, even with me not being through what you'd been through, there's still that thing of, oh, that's my responsibility as mum, and it's a really difficult thing to get rid of as somebody who thinks they're quite an independent feminist woman.
yeah,
It's still that default thing of, "Oh, no, but I'm failing everybody if I can't do
yeah,
it all." Where actually to know that we have the support and actually use the support and believe in it.
yeah. And I think also now my youngest is 16 in a couple of days, and even now I'm like, "Oh, I can't because of him," and I'm like, But he can, because he's older and he's amazing. He can cook his own dinner. He can let himself in, look after the dogs and do everything. But it's still that mentality where I've always been like, well, I can't because I've got school, and I can't because I've got this, because I need to be there for him, kind of thing. But now it's really weird, because I'm like, I don't actually need to be. And I
Yeah.
can go and do things. And that I still struggle with a little bit, because it is still that transition phase, but we are getting there.
Well, it's that mindset again, isn't it? That we don't realise that sometimes the decisions that we're making are because of the mindset, because we believe this is what is women and mums that we should be doing, regardless of what age the children are and what they're doing and everything else. It's, oh, we should be doing that, or we should be doing this, when actually we have support around us that means that we can do some different things as long as it works in everybody's calendar. And for the like, we're a family unit, we're a family team, so it has to work for the family, whatever decisions we make. But then it's reminding ourselves that actually, like you say, your son making his dinner one night for you to go to an event or to go away and do something is actually fine, and he'll actually love it and thrive and be, yeah, and be an independent teenager, which is
Yeah,
what we want for them all.
exactly. And now I guess it's more the case of, oh, we can't leave the dogs that long on their own. But and that my son's in at just after 3 from school, so he's also around to look after the dogs. So it's just figuring it out in that new way of being.
We Yeah, and reminding ourselves and reminding the old brains that it's actually okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And the last one is the joy killer, the thing you would like to see removed from the world.
I think this is probably a pretty obvious one, but domestic abuse, of course. Yeah, I would love for that to be removed from the world. Absolutely.
Do you believe that there is, like, it's always existed, and there'll be lots of people that will say it will always exist, but do you believe there is something at a fundamental level that could be changed to reduce the instances or the situations that this occurs in?
I think education is really key. Teaching our children, boys and girls, what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, how to behave, if something's not right, how to recognise it, and not nip it in the bud as such, but stop it before it becomes a lot bigger. So if we recognise the signs earlier on, we can stop it getting so bad. But
Mhm.
education in general, I mean, my son amazes me every day. He knew something wasn't quite right between me and his dad. He's not had any contact with his dad for quite a while now, doesn't want to. But I'd never told him anything. He was too young. But I knew when I started sharing my story, kids on social media, I was like, he needs to know the basics, kind of thing, before I start telling other people. Um, and then he just come home from school one day and he's like, I think one of the footballers had been in the news for an incident or something, and he's just like, I don't understand why they do it, Mum. They've got all of this at the world. They've got all these opportunities. They get to do this. They get to play football for a living. Why do they do things like this? And I was like, we need to have this conversation now. And just then having that conversation with him and explaining, not everything, obviously, he doesn't know all the details, and I hope that he never does have to hear all the details. But having that grounding and understanding, he now looks out with his friends. He calls his friends out when things he doesn't feel comfortable with. He's had his first couple of relationships, and he's kind of recognized signs in those and things like that. And it's just like he's questioning it, and he's like, is this the right way to behave? Is this right? Is this a red flag? And just being able to have those conversations as a 15, 16-year-old has just been incredible. And I think the more we can do of that with our children, the more we can fight back
Mhm.
to reduce the amount of instances that happen. You're right, I don't think it'll ever go fully, but the more we can educate our children on domestic abuse and everything else, I think the more that we can try and reduce it a little bit at least.
I think that's it, and I think the education, that because for me, having a child just go into the school system in September, and lots of different families and lots of different children from lots of backgrounds and different, and there's even just, what are we now? Just after the first half term, so like 7 weeks in, the different conversations I'm having with my 4.5-year-old about people's behaviour
Yeah.
is not shocking. I don't think shocking's the right word, but perhaps I wasn't fully prepared for the conversations that I would be having so early on. Like, you expect it when they start getting a little bit older. You certainly expect it when they're teenagers. And I do believe that a lot of it starts in the house, and I think you can negate a lot of what you might not see as good behavior of other people as long as you have how your family conducts them. But I do think there's something about the education and the education system in this country and mobile phones and social media. And I love social media. I'm all over social media, but I'm an adult who can train my algorithm to show me the things that I want to see and
Yeah.
what I put out. In fact, there was a thing on this morning when I was making a cup of tea on one of the breakfast things about there was a celebrity talking about a porn addiction that he has had, and then talking about the effect this has on teenage boys and what they're seeing. And people had set themselves up as teenage boys on social media platforms, even though they were a grown adult. And the first thing they were shown was highly violent and graphic pornography. And I think that's the stuff that we have to get a hold of. And when Stephen Graham made that Adolescence
Yeah, which I
move,
still saying is still on the watch list. We're getting there gradually.
yeah, I think that from that thing of like they had no idea that their son was even capable of what he did and what was happening on social media and I think it's those conversations that need to be had and need to be open, and I'm preparing myself for when my girls are old enough that I have those conversations of what they deem as appropriate, and what could happen if they send a wrong type of picture, or if anybody treats them in a certain way, what they can do about that. But it's such a difficult thing to do, but there's definitely more that can be done from even without heavy government legislation, but just from a education of what we talk about in schools, and not be scared of talking about relationships and talking about the way we behave and talking about sex, because that plays a huge part. And there's statistics you can see that in the countries that do talk about it, they have low rates of domestic abuse, teenage pregnancy, and everything in between, and they're talking about it from a very, very young age. So it's not gonna be an easy thing, and I don't think it'll ever go away, but if we can do something to have less tendencies, then and start as much as we can from home,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I
which
think not not turning a blind eye and thinking that we can't do anything, because we can.
yeah, and the fact you have what you've said about your son, you have made the changes. He
Yeah,
was originally in a household that was showing him how not to behave, and now look at the positivity of him questioning and calling his friends out.
yeah,
I mean, that is so powerful.
it is. And I think and I'm going to say men here because it is more perpetrated by men, but the same goes for women as well. But if men can see it in other men and call it out in the man way, then I think that will have a big impact as well. Because, yeah, women probably would call it out between themselves a lot more. But if men did
Yeah,
as well, that would be a big step forward as well.
a huge step forward, a huge step forward, and just to even acknowledge it,
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
and not just that of, but he's always all right with me down the pub.
Yeah, exactly. That's the bit that needs to stop. If you're good mates with somebody, you should be able to say that's not okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Not
absolutely.
turning a blind eye is endorsing it, in my point of
Yeah,
view.
I completely agree. I completely agree. So if people want to find you and come and connect with you, where's the best place for them to do that, Cheryl?
Probably on Instagram, I am Cheryl Sharp, but also my website, cherylsharp.co.uk. There's loads of resources on there and support links as well. So yeah, kind of look.
Obviously, if this has brought anything up for anybody in this episode, they can obviously reach out to you and ask for help. But is there any specific charity or helpline or anything that you would like to
Yeah,
point
so you've
them
got
to?
Women's Aid and Refuge are the two main biggest charities and organisations that support. So definitely definitely reach out to those if you need it. There's the National Domestic Abuse Helpline, which I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but I can share it with you to put in the
Yeah,
show.
I'll put it in. Everything will be in the show notes. All Cheryl's contact details, and plus all of those charities and helplines she put. If you please reach out to somebody today, anything in this story has made you think that you
Yeah.
need to get that support.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for coming on. I know it's not an easy subject to talk about, but it's so important. And I think it's so wonderful that you're sharing your story. I always make everybody answer one last question before they go. And that is, what is the joy legacy that you would like to leave behind?
Oh, that's a good one. I think that I turned something negative into something positive
Absolutely.
and lived my life on my terms.
And I think that's a really important message. And for anybody who is going through something like you, that you are still living your life in your terms, even when you feel trapped, and you can change it today. And you, Cheryl, are proof of that.
Yep. Yeah. If I can do it, so can everybody else.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. It has been a truly special episode.
Thank you. I've loved it.
For me, that was an extraordinary conversation. I hope you found extraordinary moments in it too. Every time I speak with someone like Cheryl, I'm reminded that joy isn't about ignoring the darkness. It's about finding light in the middle of it and almost using that as the fuel to get you out of the darkness, to move you forward, to have that momentum, to perhaps make a great big change. If there was anything that resonated with you, or perhaps you feel you need to help yourself or to help anybody, all of the links in the show notes are to places where you can speak to, you can reach out to, and you can get help if that is what you are looking for. Here are my 3 biggest takeaways from today's episode. Number 1, that resilience is built one decision at a time. Cheryl's journey shows that the big moment of change doesn't just happen, and that healing doesn't happen in one big moment. It's the small, brave steps towards rebuilding a life, towards starting something new, towards making that change. It doesn't just happen in that big moment. It's all of the wee brave steps leading up to it and the wee brave steps that you continue after it. Number 2, that education saves lives. The more we talk, the more we teach, and the more we lead with compassion and kindness, the more that we can break the silence around domestic abuse and other traumas and create change that lasts. This was a real learning episode for me, and a learning that I don't want to stop here, and I hope that you feel the same. And number 3, that joy is a form of power. After everything that Cheryl has been through, she has chosen joy over and over again, not as denial, not as that it didn't happen, not as making it smaller or her trauma smaller or what she has been through smaller, but as defiance, proof that hope is stronger than fear, that hope for a different future is stronger than the fear of making that change. If Cheryl's story touched you, please share this episode with someone in your world that might just need to hear that it is possible to rebuild and rise even after the most unbelievable trauma and life events. And if you haven't already, go follow Cheryl and her work. She really is doing incredible things to change how we talk about and tackle domestic abuse. And if you have a team or you work in a business, that we could all learn about seeing the signs and how we can actually help improve things and make things better. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. As I've already said, all of the links are in the show notes for Cheryl and for any other charities and places that you may need to have and continue this conversation. Thank you so much for listening and joining us today. This has been the Joy Work Show, where we keep finding the courage to choose joy even when it's hard.